New Financial Services Minister Stephen Jones says he will prioritise easing the regulatory burden on financial advisors. This as the number of advisors plummet following increased regulatory burden post the Banking Royal Commission. Joining me now is Angus Woods from Advisor Ratings to discuss what kind of signals are you getting from the new Financial Services Minister there as far as his intentions for the industry?
Yeah, well, first thing I will say is the new government is indicating significant change, and I think that's a good thing all around for the advice industry. So it's one of the few times I think the government has come in to post the election and actually starting to follow through what they said they would do. What we're seeing is Stephen's looking at to really de-burden the industry. In terms of the last 4 years, we've seen a bunch of new legislation that's come into place on the back of FOFA, which was back in 2014. But since then, we've seen the education requirements, we've seen the obligatory exam that advisors need to go through. What I would say though, and a caution for Stephen, is to not overhaul things so significantly, because there has been progress in this industry towards professionalisation. Their trust was quite low pre the Royal Commission. We've actually seen a doubling in trust in terms of an uplift in trust. And we know that anyone that's got a financial advisor, and through our own studies, is actually far better off than those without. In the Nirvana world, if everyone had a financial advisor, CPA Australia, I think, post this study that said $600 billion in economic benefit per year would actually hit the economy if everyone had a financial advisor. So you see the benefits of financial advice, and hence why Stephen says, well, we need to get more people in front of a financial advisor.
Absolutely. Just in terms of what has happened, where you just mentioned the word progress, where has the progress been? And then perhaps where are the areas that maybe the current legislation has overcooked it a bit and led to some of these negative impacts on the industry? Yeah,
so I think progress, and we talk about progress, and you'll have some corners of the industry saying the professionalisation element has been overcooked. I think in terms of the element of advisors requiring to sit an exam, requiring to actually get a degree, I think in the eyes of the public that's a good thing. And I think furthering that in terms of making sure that we set down that further profession is important for us to instill trust in this whole industry. In terms of overcooking, I think there's been a lot of red tape that's been thrown at this industry in terms of, especially around the requirements around the statement of advice, these big documents, 50, 60 page documents that advisors have to give to their clients. No one reads them. No one reads them. So, the record of advice that came in during the pandemic, one way of looking at to sort of simplifying it through technology, simplifying it through just, 3-4 page sort of advice statements is all that's required. We're now getting costs up. If you walk through an advisor's door, the first thing they'll say, it's going to cost you a minimum of $5,000. Yeah. And you're getting people leave.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of advisors, obviously, in the industry, who just basically say that, I tell people to go elsewhere and do, what's the term, do your own research, because it's simply not worth your time. Personal anecdote as well is that I was looking at sort of course last year, thinking about stockbroking, and thought maybe that's the way that I'll go next in my career. And I found that really to be able to go down that path in terms of investment advisor is that you need to do your kind of a master's degree or whatever happens to be in financial planning. And I was like, well, why do I need to learn about deceased estates and wills if I want to talk about, the investment thesis between Rio and BHB? I mean, is there scope here to kind of sort of further subdivide the industry based on advisor type, to be able to make sure that the people who do want to go into stockbroking don't need to get deterred by the fact that they're needing to do these planning courses, and then pure financial planners can have the degrees tailored to them to make sure that they can do their job optimally? Is there space for that?
You raise an interesting point. I do think there does need to be some sort of segmentation in this industry. So the whole role of financial planner is not necessarily investment advice. One of the things that we're looking at from a quality of advice review, which is pegged down for the end of this year, the whole industry is now going through part of Senator Hume, previous in terms of the minister in this area, charged in this area, was looking at the quality of advice review. I think with the stockbroking world, and it comes down to the definition of the type of investor. We've got this definition around what's constitutes a sophisticated investor. Hasn't been changed since 1993 or something. I could be mistaken, but at least 20, 30 years around this 250,000 minimum annual salary, $2.5 million of assets. That element, I think, needs to be overhauled and looked at.
Yeah.
So whether it's an increase in the limits, which is an easy way to do that, or is there some sort of basic exploratory work that the industry could do when a client comes through a stockbroker's door or a financial planner's door to say, how sophisticated are you?
Yeah.
And then that really comes down to common sense to go, okay, if you want to buy BHP shares, I can act on that behalf for you, rather than go through this whole fact find about, do you know what credit card debts do you have? Do you know what that impact's going to have on your life in 40 years in terms of buying those shares? So there needs to be something simpler.
Yeah, absolutely. And for someone who's worked in the industry on an advice basis, you certainly run into some perverse incentives too if you are running that kind of standard model of 250k assets or whatever it happens to be. Not necessarily the most accurate way of doing things. Well, final question, and I guess you get to have the spotlight here for a moment. In a perfect world, we walk away from this review. Yep. What would come from it, and how would the industry look afterwards?
Yeah, really good question. We actually made a submission to the Quality of Advice Review last week, and there were 3 key areas that we looked at. Was we know that quality of advice has actually gone up since the Royal Commission. We've seen a massive exodus in terms of the number of advisors. So there's obviously, that has had a positive impact in terms of some of those who's left, but obviously there's been some good people that have left. But having an industry-wide benchmark to showcase to the industry about the impact of advice and how good the quality is out there. Secondly, I think the changing of the definition around what is a sophisticated investor, and therefore capturing more of those wholesale advisors who are probably, off-piste, I could say, in terms of maybe advising in areas that they shouldn't advise. The third element I'd look at in that respect is around differentiating an advisor to the rest of the. We've talked about finfluencers a lot. I think finfluencers and in this market, in terms of we think there's an easy way to look at that, like a unique mark or something like that says this is what an advisor is and this is what a non-advisor is. I think there's a role for these sorts of types of people. So broadly, there's sort of 3 areas that we think that the some quick wins that the Quality of Advice Review can do. There's a bunch of others, but I won't go into them now. But there's a few quick wins that I think this Quality of Advice Review can be doing. Not the least technology, and I know I think the submissions will be focused around technology.
Yeah.